logged the first sighting on day 1 as a sensor ghost, nothing more. A flicker at the edge of the hallowed strait, gone before the array could lock a track. By day 41, I knew the shape of every cutter in the Kalisk patrol line by the cadence of its drive wash, and I knew it the way you know a man's footstep on a stair you've climbed in the dark too many nights running. We were not supposed to be in that corridor. The strait belonged to the liturgy by treaty older than my service record, a ribbon of cleared space they called sanctified, threaded between 2 dying suns where their pilgrim convoys ran without escort because no one was foolish enough to bleed in a god's hallway. We were foolish. Command needed eyes on the convoy traffic and a frigate small enough to read as debris on a casual scan, and the Coracle was small. 60 crew, no weapons worth the name beyond point defense, a hull built for listening rather than fighting. We went in dark and we ran the whole length of that strait reading everything we could and giving the patrol cutters nothing to put a name to. For 41 days that meant flight, not the kind that panics, the kind that's a discipline of its own, a held breath stretched out past where a held breath should reasonably go. I'd take the helm myself on the legs where the cutters came close, because I did not trust anyone else's hands not to flinch, and flinching was the one thing that would have killed us. The liturgy did not chase debris, they chased intent. Show intent and they would burn the corridor clean rather than let an unbeliever's machine carry word of what it saw back into the dark. My exec, Priya Sandoval, kept the log in a hand steadier than mine. She used to say the cutters moved like men at prayer who'd rather not be interrupted, and she wasn't wrong. Kalisk doctrine ran on liturgy in the oldest sense. Every patrol leg, every hail, every kill was a rite performed in a fixed order, and a thing that didn't fit the order didn't exist to them until it forced itself into the text. We had spent 41 days making sure we never forced anything. We logged their drive signatures, their hailing cadence, the gaps between their search sweeps, and we used those gaps the way a man uses the seams in a fence. There was a night on day 26 I still turn over, because it was the closest we'd come before the end. A cutter broke its sweep pattern and drifted within 400 meters of our drift vector, close enough that Conlon swore he could read hull plating without the magnification array. We ran silent for 11 minutes with the reactor at idle and every non-essential system dark, and I remember counting my own pulse against the bulkhead clock, because it was the only instrument left I trusted to tell me anything. The cutter never found us. It corrected course and resumed its right, and Sandoval exhaled like she'd been holding that breath the whole 11 minutes alongside me. We didn't talk about it afterward. There wasn't a way to talk about it that didn't sound like fear, and fear wasn't something I let live out loud on that bridge, not because the crew couldn't carry it, but because carrying it quietly was the only thing keeping the ship invisible. 41 days teaches you that discipline isn't the absence of fear, it's just fear with somewhere useful to go. On day 41, the seams closed. I don't know if it was bad luck or a pattern we'd worn smooth from overuse, but they had 4 cutters in formation across the only vector that would get us back to the threshold gate, and a 5th, bigger, older, its hull scarred in long ritual grooves I'd only ever seen on command vessels, sitting dead center like a closed door. Sandoval called it before I did. That's not a patrol leg, Captain, that's a net. There's a kind of quiet that comes over a bridge when everyone understands, in the same half-second, that running is no longer an option. Nobody spoke. Petty Officer Conlon, my sensor lead, had his hands flat on the console like he could hold the readings still by will alone. I had maybe 4 seconds to decide what kind of ship the Coracle was going to be in the next 60. We had run from everything for 41 days. I did not see a reason that flight, attempted one more time, against a closed door, would do anything but get my crew killed in a corridor nobody back home would ever hear about. So I held position, killed the drift, brought us dead in space at the center of their formation, and opened every channel I had on a clean, unencrypted hail, the kind of transmission you can't disguise as a weapon spinning up, because it carries nothing but itself. This is Captain Easton Vire, Terran vessel Coracle. We have been in your corridor 41 days. We are stopping. The silence that came back lasted long enough that Conlon's hands went white on the console. Then the command cutter, I'd learn later its right name was the Halcyon's tongue, answered, and the voice that came through was layered, 3 registers speaking close to unison, the way I understood later their priest commanders spoke when a thing mattered enough to be recorded in the liturgy. They did not ask what we were, they asked how long we had watched. I told them the truth, because the lie wouldn't have held, and because 41 days of restraint had taught me something about what a careful answer was worth. 41 days, I said. Every patrol leg, every gap, every hail cadence, logged and never used against them, never relayed, never acted on beyond what it took to keep from being found. I told them we had had 4 separate windows where we could have slipped past their net entirely undetected, and had not taken the last one, the one that would have cost the convoy behind us its escort cover for an hour. We'd held our line instead. I did not say why. I think they understood why before I could have explained it. What followed was not a fight. I want to be honest about that, because I went into that hour braced for one, point defense charged, Sandoval's hand resting on a console that would have done us no good against 4 cutters in a command ship. What followed was a silence with weight to it, the kind I'd later hear described, by the one Kalisk envoy who ever spoke plainly to me, as the sound of a doctrine recalculating itself in real time. Their patrol cadence was built to recognize threats by what they took. We had spent 41 days proving, leg by leg, gap by gap, that we knew exactly what we could take and chose, every time, not to. The command cutter held its position another 6 hours, long enough that I stopped believing it was a courtesy and started believing it was a rite being performed, slow and deliberate, that I had no liturgy to read. When the Halcyon's tongue finally moved, it did not move to intercept. It rotated its formation outward, opened a clean vector through the net, and sent a final transmission. Not the layered voice this time, but a single register, almost human in its plainness, that said only that the corridor would remember a guest who had not taken what it could have. That was the whole of it in the moment. No treaty signed across that silence, nothing that would have made a tidy ending for the report I filed afterward. What we got, over the following months, was something narrower and harder to name. 3 weeks after the Strait, a Kalisk envoy met us at the threshold gate aboard an unarmed shuttle, alone, which I was told afterward was itself a kind of rite. A person sent without escort is a person sent as a statement. She did not introduce herself by name. She asked only to walk the Coracle's listening deck, and stood a long while in front of the console where Conlon had logged 41 days of their patrol cadence, reading numbers she could not have understood, and didn't ask me to explain. Before she left, she told me, in that same plain single register the command cutter had used, that the liturgy had no right for a guest who watched everything and took nothing, and that they had been forced to write one. What they wrote, in the end, was a standing clearance. Kalisk convoys that stopped scattering at the first read of our drive signature. A corridor that opened rather than closed when the Coracle's transponder crossed its threshold. Command called it a cold peace and logged it as a minor diplomatic gain, one line in a much longer ledger. I call it the 41 days we spent teaching a corridor full of patient, devout strangers that the most dangerous thing in their hallway wasn't the ship that ran. It was the one that could have stopped running long before it did, and chose the moment instead. I still hear it sometimes, that layered voice asking how long we had watched. I think about how close I came to answering it with full thrust and a vector for the gate. We would have made it, probably. We would also never have known what was waiting on the other side of holding still.